learn how to add guides to our page on Photopea, right? So this is a letter size page, which means that it's an 8.5 by 11-inch size page, right? So let's say I have my ruler already out here, right? So from the ruler, I can go ahead and click inside the ruler and drag out, and that's where the guides come out, right? You guys can see that there's this bright blue line that comes out, and I could add as many as I want, right? Right? So how do we add guides in a precise manner, right? So let's say that we want to create an 8.5 margin space all around our page, right? I'm bringing them back into the ruler so that they delete. If I go back over here, you guys can see it's not there anymore, right? So I can delete them, bring them back into the ruler, take them out of the ruler, right? This is where you add them and hide them, right? You can also manually input some guides, right? Move over here. I'm going to go into the menu section and I'm going to go to view and add guides, right? If we have a precise measurement of how much space we want around our margin, right? In our margin, then we add the numbers here. If I add a guide at 0, right? It adds a guide right at the edge of the page, right? That's where the starting of the page is, right? And if I'm gonna put comma because I'm separating the numbers, right? I'm gonna put 8.5 because that's the length of the page, right? I should see one on this edge of the page as well, right? We use the ruler to sort of locate ourselves on where the margin should be, right? So if I want it at the 8.5 mark, right, it should be right here. This is where the 8.5 mark is on the ruler, right? If I want to add a guide, right, on the 4-inch section of our page, I'm going to go in here, put a comma, add 4, right? And it adds it right on the 4 on the ruler, right? You guys can see that. You guys should be able to see that, okay? If I want to add a guide on every inch mark, right, I'm just going to put a comma, 1, comma, 2, comma, 3, right? And they should now be guides on every, right, inch indicator at the 1, at the 2, at the 3, and at the 4, right? I have those numbers in here. Okay, so we just use the ruler to sort of locate ourselves on how to apply the guides, right? If I want to add a vertical guide, which would be one of these, right? The ones that go from left to right, right? That's another guide that we can add as well, right? So we can add the horizontal ones, which are the ones that go up and down, right? And the vertical ones that go from left to right, right? So depending on what you're trying to do, right, depends on where you should add your number, right? So I'm going to go back to view and add guides, okay? So I can put one at 0 and one at 0 for this one as well, right? So this is where the guides start, right? They start at the 0 mark. The 0 mark is over here on the top left corner of our page, right? So if I want to add a 0.5-inch margin, right? The first number that I would add is 0.5, right? Because I want it at the 0.5 mark right here in between the 0 and the 1, right? We need to create a space from the edge of the page, right? Just a little bit inside so that we know this is the space we can actually use. We can't use this space anymore. We can't use a margin space. Only the space that's inside the page, right? If I want to move this guide, right, into our 0.5 margin space, I'm going to go ahead and change it in the vertical, and I'm going to put 0.5 inch as well, right? And now I brought it down, right? It put it at the middle of the 0 and 1 inch ruler, right in the middle right here, right? So we've created a 0.5 margin right here at the top, okay? So how do we add a guide without actually manually putting it in, right? If I just manually put in a guide like this, there's no guarantee that this is spaced out the same amount as over here, right? How do we guarantee that? How do we make sure that this space, this margin space over here, is the same size as this one, right? We use a 0.5 inch measurement to add our guide right here, right? So how do we add it on this side, right? How do we make sure that we have an exact measurement, an exact margin, right? I'm going to delete this vertical guide right? And I'm going to go back into the menu bar. I'm going to go into view and add guides, right? And I'm going to add the numbers that we need to create that perfectly spaced out margin, right? Using the same measurement, which is 0.5, right? So if I add a margin right at the edge of our page, because that's the length of our page, right? 8.5 by 11. It's going to add it right at the edge of the page, right? That's not where we need our guide, right? We already know where the edge of the page is, right? So all you're going to do is subtract the margin space from 8.5, right? So I don't need the 0.5, right? 8.5 minus 0.5 should be 8, right? You press OK, and it's going to give us the exact space, right? The 0.5 that we need. We need to erase that 0.5, and it should be right on the 8 on the ruler, right? Same thing for the vertical one right here at the bottom, right? We're going to take the length of the page, which is it's right at 11, right? So if we go to add a guide, and I add a guide on the vertical for 11, it's going to put it right at the edge of our page, right? We don't need it there. We need it in a little bit inside of the page, right? We need to take some space away from the page, right? So we're going to go 11 minus 0.5, which is 10.5, right? If you do your math correctly, that's the number you should get. I'm going to press OK, right? And it's going to give us the correct space of a margin, right? Because we did our math correctly, right? We did 11 minus 0.5, and it should be right at the 10.5 mark on the ruler, right? It should be right between 10 and 11, right? And now we have a perfectly spaced out 0.5 inch margin all around our page, right? Let's say that we want to change it to 0.25, right? I'm going to go back into the add guides. I'm going to erase the numbers that I have here, right? And I'm going to add the 0.5 guide, 0.25, sorry, we changed it, right, to 0.25. Now we have a smaller spaced margin, right? This guide should be at the 0.25 mark on the ruler right here, and also over here, right? And that's what it looks like. It did it correctly, right? So again, I'm going to take the length of the page, which is 8.5, minus 0.25, which would be 8.25, right? It should be, the number that you add for your guide should be smaller than the length of your page, right? Because you need it to go inside. If you try to put more space, right? Let's say I add the number instead of subtracting it, it's going to put it outside of our page, right? We don't need it on the outside. We need it on the white space, right? Nothing where the black space is going to print. It's not really relevant, right? It just gives us an idea of where our page is, right? This is our workspace. That doesn't really apply to anything, right? So we have to make sure that we always subtract, right, our margins from the right side, right? So that they could go inside left, right? I'm going to do the same thing for the vertical one, right? I'm going to put comma. I'm going to take 11 because that's the length of the page. And I'm going to subtract the 0.25, which is 10.75, right? And if I did my math correctly, I'm going to scroll down, right? I should have a margin inside of the space at the 0.25, right? 0.25 space from 11 to 10.75. That's how much space there should be, right? And that's what it should look like, right? A 0.25 inch margin all around our page.